In October 2019, new regulations were issued pertaining to the conservation of fuel and power in new dwellings, otherwise known as the Building Regulations Part L1A. These regulations are actively being consulted on, but unsurprisingly, given the global pandemic in 2020, the rollout of these regulations was delayed. That said, progress is now recommenced, and we expect enforcement in June 2022. The consultation process has given us a scope of understanding for the construction of new residential buildings once the regulations are active, which are as follows. 1. Energy efficiency. 2 increases in building performance were proposed at the consultation stage, with either a 20% or 31% suggested. It has been confirmed that the building performance will need to be increased by the higher 31%. This increase means that new buildings constructed under these regulations will require their calculated CO2 emissions to be 31% lower than under current requirements. New homes will need to be designed with greater consideration around energy efficiency to be compliant. 2. Carbon factors. The UK government is making strides towards sustainable power sources with a target of 0 coal sources by 2025. In terms of electrical power, this transition is referred to as greening of the grid. As a result, carbon consumption associated with electricity generation is reducing. This reduction will impact on new buildings, as under the new regulations, electrical heating systems will perform as well as gas-fired boilers. If heat pumps are used within the property, even lower levels of carbon emissions will be associated with heating the property, further assisting performance. Primary energy rate. We expect primary energy rates to be included as an additional assessment metric alongside CO2 emissions. The primary energy rate will account for the power wasted at power stations and gas refineries. The likely primary energy factors for a particular property are likely to be 1.5 kilowatts per kilowatt delivered for electricity and 1.3 kilowatt per kilowatt delivered for gas. So while you may use electricity sources in the property to reduce your carbon factor, the primary energy source consideration will penalise such systems for inefficiencies at the source. 4. Fabric energy efficiency. Initially, the consultation document proposed removing the fabric energy efficiency metric, but we now expect this to be retained. The general feeling is that this metric ensures that developers do not economise on insulation levels in favour of technologies like heat pumps. We expect some changes to the fabric energy efficiency metric in a 15% increase in toughness against today's measures. 5. Route to compliance. Target emission rates and primary energy rates gives us clues to the benchmarks for compliance under the new regulations. We know that the 31% target will be included in the Part L regulations. Therefore, we can see a route to this compliance. For example, installing heat pumps and PV without necessarily requiring a substantial uplift in fabric, as long as that fabric meets the fabric energy efficiency metric. The proposed 20% target also showed requirements and considerations if gas-fired boilers were being proposed, i.e. this needed a considerable improvement in fabric performance, which included triple glazing plus the 31% target measures that would be required. 6. Transitional arrangements. The approved documents are expected to come into force in June 2022. Until this time, current building regulations apply. However, there is an agreed cut-off date, which is a transition period between the release of the approved documents and the enforcement, whereby developers can no longer use the old regulations. This transition period allows developers time to prepare and understand the regulations. Under the last revision in 2014, this transition period was 12 months. 7. Multi-building sites. Under the current approved documents, if a building notice, initial notice or full plans deposit are submitted to building control before the new regulations are live, and providing that work is commenced on site before the cut-off date, then the previous regulations can be used for that entire project. This grace period allows developers and construction companies the advantage of consistency, even if their site consists of multiple plots over different phases, as long as work begins on the site within the 12-month transition period. The entire development can be constructed within the former regulations, irrespective of the completion date. However, the new Part L regulations intend to close this multi-site loophole. There will be transitional arrangements, but this will apply to individual buildings rather than a whole site. Suppose you had several buildings on one site, say blocks of apartments, a terrace of houses or a detached house, and works commenced on half the individual buildings before the cut-off date. In that case, that half can be built under the old regulations, but the remaining half must comply with the new regulations. 8. The Future Home Standard. The government also announced amendments to the assessment of non-dwelling type buildings, which is part L2A, new regulations that focus on preventing overheating in dwellings, along with improvements on existing building extensions and renovations. It was confirmed that a further uplift in energy efficiency, seen in the part L1A requirements, would follow in 2025, with a further increase in performance required, amounting to a 75% improvement on current regulations. This topic is ever evolving as information becomes available, and further guidance will be required to ensure your future buildings will be compliant with the regulations. At Foreman Roberts, thanks to our expertise, we can support and assist you no matter the stage of the project. Get in touch with our team, and together we'll see your project come to life.